you enjoy the story. The summer of my 17th year. It was raining heavily. I had just finished my last practice test. The uniform shirt was soaked with sweat on my back. Walking slowly on the way back to the bus station, in my hand was the math test paper, with a few drops of water on it. In front of the school gate, the row of royal poinciana trees was still blooming brightly, the flowers falling into a carpet, as if the earth and sky could also feel the silent feelings of the final year students. The umbrella I carried was tiny, not enough to cover my shoulders, but it was very suitable to cover a stranger standing in the rain by the forest station. He was wearing the uniform of Than Nam High School, but it was an old model. The hem of the shirt had been changed, showing that he had just graduated not long ago. Luong carried a black backpack, long legs, a tall and thin figure. His face was not very clear because he was bent down, bored with his wet water, his hair slightly tangled by the wind and rain. He looked like a character from a youth novel I had read. I stood by for a long time, seeing that he did not have an umbrella, just leaning slightly to avoid the wind, hesitating for 3 seconds. I turned the umbrella to the right. Rain fell on the umbrella. He raised his head, his eyes slightly stunned when he saw me. I didn't say anything, just nodded slightly. He looked at me for a brief second, then pursed his lips and said in a hoarse voice, "Thank you." We stood under the umbrella together, a quiet enough distance apart. The bus station was quite empty. Only a few people passed by. The wind was still cold even though it was summer. He moved to quietly cover my shoulder that was covered by the rain, a very small gesture but made my heart skip a beat. No one said anything more until the bus stopped. He got on. When I passed by, it was still the same gaze, but this time there was a fleeting smile, as light as the wind. The car door closed. The rain had not stopped, but from that moment, I no longer hated rainy days. 3 months later, I received a letter of admission to university. When I checked my admission file, I found out that the place I was going to was Shangjiang University of Economics, the school that I had read in the newspaper about national outstanding students in the past, among which there was a person named Song Yuan Shen. I don't know why I remember that name so clearly. Song Yuan Shen was a very cold name, both mature and with his own attitude. It seemed that unconsciously, I had always followed the things that belonged to him, or at least the faint image of that boy on that rainy day. The first orientation of the university took place on a sunny day. I arrived early, sat in the middle row of the large hall, opened a brand new notebook. When the MC's voice sounded, I was still thinking about the upcoming subjects when a guy clapped his hands for a long time, making me raise my head. A person stepped onto the stage, a simple black suit, a calm face, steady eyes as if he had read countless philosophy books. I was startled. It was him. Without asking, I was sure that the person standing there was the one I used to hold an umbrella with. I had never seen anyone with such eyes. Every time he tilted his head to look at someone, it made people feel as if they were being seen through their hearts. It was neither cold nor distant, just too deep. The MC introduced Mr. Tong Veen Pham, an excellent former student in management, currently a graduate student, and a special mentor for the first-year study companionship program. Everyone around me whispered in admiration. I still sat still, my heart in turmoil. Song Veen Pham, the name that had passed my ears in an article, now appeared clearly before my eyes amid the stage lights and the cheers of the new students. He didn't look at me, but I felt somewhere in that gaze. There was a very slight pause, just a second, but my heart began to panic like that day in the rain. After the ceremony, I stood in the schoolyard. The tree next to the library made the wind blow. The sky was clear without a cloud. Someone called me from behind. I turned back. You. Don't be there. Not with a distant look. Like under some umbrella. But a smile. More gentle than the summer wind. We've met. Before. Right? I didn't answer. Just wondering if he remembered me. Before or if I had already remembered TAC DA for a long time. The school library was located behind the main lecture hall, next to a small garden that was carefully tended. The hexagonal stone-paved paths leading through the dormitories, the study area, and the administrative area created a strangely quiet space, as if the whole city had slowed down a few beats when entering the school gate. When I was in high school, I once read an article describing this university as the place where hundreds of students volunteered to secretly love each other. At that time, I laughed faintly, but now I felt it seemed like I was about to be included in that list. 3 days after the orientation ceremony, the advisory board sent an email to a group of high-achieving first-year students, inviting them to participate in an intensive study program, study in small groups, with personal mentors, academic advisors, and research support from the first year. I was selected and my group mentor was Song Yuenshin. When I first saw that name in the email, I almost dropped my phone. I read it 7 times. No wrong, Song Yuenshin, you will be my study companion for a semester. The group meeting took place on Saturday afternoon in the conference room on the 4th floor of the main library. I arrived early, my heart uneasy, still holding a book in my hand, but I hadn't turned a page yet. Sitting next to me were 3 other students, all of them nervous because they were about to meet the famous mentor. 5 minutes before the start time, the door opened. He walked in, laptop in hand, a cool colored shirt, his wrists showing small bones, his slender fingers flipping through documents leisurely. On the bridge of his nose were thin, rimmed glasses, which made his appearance even colder, yet full of charisma. I didn't dare to look too long. Hello everyone, he said, his voice low and gentle. No up, no down. I'm Song Yuenshin, a PhD student in the year Ha, the mentor of this group. Everyone nodded in unison. I sat still, my fingers lightly squeezing the edge of the notebook, trying to keep my face expressionless. The first session was mainly about introducing and arranging the study progress. He spoke very neatly, not long-windedly, with an absolutely professional attitude, but every time his eyes accidentally passed over me, my heart felt like someone was squeezing lightly. We didn't talk privately. He didn't show any sign of recognizing that I had met him. I was a little disappointed, although I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I hoped he would remember. I hoped that brief time of holding an umbrella was not too small for him. The second week, I went to the library to borrow a book. The 3rd floor research area was always much quieter. I found an English version of Behavioral Economics on the bookshelf, and was about to pull it out when I saw a book fall to the floor. I bent down, and at the same time, someone else bent down. My hand touched his hand. I raised my head and it was him. Song Yuenshin looked at me, paused a little, then quickly withdrew his hand, picked up the book for me. It was your book. I nodded. Yes, thank you. The atmosphere was quiet for a second. He stood up first, put the book in my hand, then turned away as if what had just happened had never happened. But a few seconds later, he stopped, turned his head and added, next time, choose a time with fewer people. This place has strong winds at night. It's easy to catch a cold. I stopped. I didn't know why. He knew I often went to the library at night. A few days later, our study group had a small topic discussion. I prepared my presentation quite well, but when it came time to present, I stumbled over my speaking because I wasn't used to presenting in front of strangers, especially someone who had made my heart beat wildly all week. I was a bit flustered, stuttering the last few words. No one laughed, but the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Song Yuenshin didn't say anything. After I returned to my seat, he continued to discuss as if nothing had happened, but when the class ended, he called me back. I stood in front of him, holding a book, my heart beating like a drum. He looked at me, his eyes neither harsh nor cold. Next time if you feel nervous, you can write a draft first. Don't try to say it all in one breath. I pursed my lips and nodded. Yes. He pushed his glasses up. His eyes slightly softened. You spoke better than you thought. Just that one sentence. I almost cried. I used to think that people like him were always talented, always calm, and wouldn't care about anyone. But that day I realized there were people who didn't need to express too much. Just a gentle look was enough to make others remember for life. Back into the dormitory, I opened my diary and wrote a line. I wasn't sure when I started liking him, but today his eyes stayed in my heart for more than a second. Which means I will remember him for more than a lifetime. Since that discussion between me and Tong Vien Tham, there was an unnamed string, thin as the sky's silk, but it kept stretching in silence. I began to realize that he had a very skillful way of observing, not making others confused, nor making them feel special. But if you pay attention, you will realize that he always remembers the smallest details of people. For example, like the fact that I often handwrite with a navy blue fountain pen, or like to drink black tea instead of coffee, or always carry a small notebook with me instead of using a note-taking app. He never said it, but one day when the group took a break, he bought everyone a drink. When it was my turn, he put a cup of warm black tea on the table. It was not good. I kept looking at the cup of tea. Everyone smiled and thanked me. Only I didn't dare to open my mouth. Not because I didn't want to say it, but because I didn't know how to ask him why he knew. Perhaps if I said it, the thin string would break. I chose to keep silent like he had. The third week when I organized a study group at the library, I arrived early and sat in the same place by the window, the sunlight gently shining on the book pages. Outside the glass door, the ginkgo tree had begun to change color. I was taking notes when a shadow passed by. A very light footstep stopped right across. I raised my head and saw him. Song Yuenshin sat down at the other table, still sitting straight, his shirt neat, his head bowed, slightly as if he was reading something. But I knew he was just pretending not to look at me. I also pretended not to know he was there. I continued to bow my head. 5 minutes later, a fountain pen rolled over from the other side, stopping right at the edge of my table. I looked down. It was his pen. I pushed it back gently, but when I touched it, I found that this pen was very similar to the pen of the year I once gave it to the boy under the umbrella. The silver pen had a water wave pattern engraved on it. The pen was not common, and it was a limited edition. My news beat skipped a beat. It was not a coincidence. It could not be a coincidence. I raised my head. He was still writing, but his eyes were slightly curved as if he was smiling. That evening I did not return to the dormitory immediately. I went for a walk around the lotus pond in the schoolyard. The late autumn wind was cool. The faint scent of car was wafting in the air. I stood by the stone railing, looking at the still water surface like a large mirror. My heart was filled with emotions that were hard to name. I did not dare to confirm, but if it was really him, the boy who stood under the umbrella in the past, why hadn't he said anything until now? If he remembered, why hadn't he called my name? If he had forgotten, why had he kept the pen all year? I leaned my hands on the railing and sighed softly. At that moment, footsteps sounded behind me. I turned back to see him approaching, his tall and thin figure blending into the darkness of the ginkgo trees in the distance. I wasn't surprised. Somehow, I thought it might be him, walking. This late, aren't you scared? His voice rang out, as gentle as the wind that had just brushed through a few shirts. I chuckled, scared, but today there are too many things in my heart. If I don't walk around, it'll be hard to sleep. He nodded, standing next to me, not too close, not too far. After a moment of silence, I asked, "Do you often keep things?" For a long time, he tilted his head slightly, his eyes flitting past me and then looking at the lake. It depended. There were things that weren't worth keeping for even a second. But there were things, even small things, that I kept for a lifetime. My heart felt like someone was holding it. I nodded and didn't ask any more, and he didn't say anything more. It was just, in that quiet night, I felt something sprouting between the two of us. Something that didn't need a name, nor a promise. After that day, there was a very small, very subtle change between me and him. But I clearly no longer avoided his eyes every time we met. He also didn't keep the same aloofness as the first day. Every time I passed the library, if he was there, he would lightly tap on the table. A very soft sound, enough for me to know I was seen. One day, I dropped a set of documents right in the second floor hallway. When I turned back to pick them up, I saw them neatly folded. I had a piece of paper clipped on my table. The wind was strong today. Remember to be careful next time. I looked at the TV, at the sturdy handwriting, and then smiled absent-mindedly like a fool. Song Yuan Shen was not the type of person who used words to move others. He used his actions little by little, day by day, like a silent stream flowing through a crevice in the rocks. I used to think that I wouldn't dare to love someone like that. Too deep, too cold, too far. But gradually I realized, as long as he turned his head to look at me once, I would willingly walk toward him forever. I started going to the library every late afternoon, not necessarily because of too much homework, nor because I couldn't concentrate in the dorm. I just liked the quiet feeling here, liked the sound of books turning evenly, and liked a person who often sat at the row of tables near the east window. Song Yuan Tham. He always came earlier than me. The dynamic gray laptop was placed next to a thick stack of printed documents. Every time he raised his head, the light from the window sang through his glasses, forming a thin border like covering bones. At first, I didn't sit close, and chose a seat 2 tables away. Later, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I always came a little early to keep a seat next to us. We didn't talk, we just sat in the same space, in the comfortable silence. Each had his own world, but we could feel each other's existence so clearly that just one person gently turning his pen could make the other person notice. One day, I fell asleep on a book, and when I woke up, it was already dark. Someone's coat was draped over my shoulders, and next to me was a cup of hot tea that I had just bought. I looked over to the empty seat he had left, without a word, only the light smell of osmanthus tea and the shirt carrying the gentle windy scent of a mature man. On Wednesday afternoon, it was raining lightly. The library was quieter than usual. I had just put down my laptop and hadn't even opened the document yet when I saw him arrive. Without saying a word, he pulled a chair opposite, put down a notebook, opened it to the middle page. This week's topic needs to be looked up. This part, I looked at it blankly. It was the difficult English specialized document section. Please help me look it up, I asked softly. He nodded lightly. The places you highlighted, I should read carefully. That part can be put in the introduction. I took the notebook. My heart felt like a small stream flowing through. It wasn't the first time he helped me, but it was the first time he took the initiative to sit opposite. Seriously opened his mouth. His eyes didn't avoid. After that, we studied together in silence. The gentle wind blew against the glass window, To the east, the ginkgo trees outside swayed. Gently, I wrote an introduction, hesitated for a moment, then turned the paper over and wrote another small line. Thank you, but why did you help me so much? I pushed the paper toward him. He glanced over the word. His lips curled slightly. Then he took a pen and wrote just one sentence because he wanted me to study. Well, it was a ridiculously simple sentence, but it made my heart flutter. I was about to say something when he raised his head to look at me. This time his eyes were not he dodged, but didn't overdo it. His voice was low and soft like the sound of rain falling outside. It was also because he wanted me to have more time in this library with him. I suddenly raised my head. In front of me was his figure in the pale afternoon light. His face had no change, but his gaze had a strangely gentle layer. He put his hands on the table, tilted his head slightly. Do you know that when people like a place, it's mostly not because it's special, but because there was someone they wanted to meet there? I couldn't breathe. The atmosphere around me seemed to freeze. Everything seemed to be silent, just for that sentence to resonate in my heart. He stood up, holding his laptop and open book. Before leaving, he said softly, "Tomorrow, if it doesn't rain, I'll come early. You like the seat by the window, right?" I still sat still, my eyes following his back, disappearing behind the bookshelf. A moment later, I bent down to the table. On the edge of my notebook there was a small piece of paper. "You left it. Don't bring it. Tomorrow, if it rains, you can cover me again." That night I sat, unable to sleep. I flipped through that piece of paper, reading it over and over again like an idiot. It turned out he hadn't forgotten, not only remembered but also kept the pen from that year. She thanked me under the umbrella. Even the way I looked at him through the rain. You remembered everything, just hadn't said it or waited for a day that was quiet enough, gentle enough to put together the words that had never been spoken. I suddenly remembered a passage in an old novel. There are people you only meet once in your life, but you spend your whole life to engrave. And there are people you only meet once, but that's enough to know you want to meet them many more times in the future. I think I'm living in such a moment. The next morning, the sun was shining. I came to the library a little early, sat in the chair by the window, the place where Tong Yuenshen said he liked me to sit. On the table there was already a cup of osmanthus tea. The lid of the cup was made of graphite paper, with a neat line written in fountain pen. It was not raining but still had to be returned. It could be considered an appointment, right? I smiled, a very light smile, but the wind blew across the lake. The tea was still hot. He had not arrived yet. I opened my laptop and began to revise the discussion, my hand absent-mindedly turning the lid of the cup. My mind seemed not to be in the lines I was typing when the sound of the chair being pulled out rang out. I didn't need to look to know who it was. He sat down opposite, put down the book, but his head was smiling softly, not really carrying an umbrella. I raised my head, met his eyes, both gentle and deep, without ripples, but could draw others to the bottom of my heart. I replied, "If it's not raining, then why do you need an umbrella?" He squinted his eyes as if he wanted to say something, but then he fell silent. We worked together, no one spoke, but the atmosphere was different. There was no more shyness, no more feeling of having to keep a distance. It was as if there was a common background between us, just lacking a final touch to complete it. I'm not the type of person who is easily moved, but his gentleness was like a plum blossom, penetrating every layer of dry soil. In my heart, I was used to being alone, used to solving everything myself, but since he came along, I began to wait for a text message, a look, a note. That afternoon, the study group had a private meeting with the mentor. After the other three left one by one, I still lingered to edit the Final document. Song Yuenshin sat in front, holding a red pen, underlining the need to be corrected. When I cited the psychological expectancy theory in consumer behavior, he paused longer than usual. Did I lean in somewhere wrong? He did not answer immediately. After a while, he asked in a low voice, I wrote this. People always deeply remember unexpected things that appear in situations they think are random. Did you write it yourself or did you quote it from somewhere? I smiled and wrote it myself. I felt that some moments in my life were like that. He looked at me, his eyes darkened slightly. If so, he said, have you ever remembered a moment like that? I was stunned and did not think about anything. I answered, truthfully, yes. On a rainy day when I was 17, the atmosphere was silent. The wind from the window blew in and touched the back of my neck. I felt his hand on the table tighten slightly, and the pen also stopped in midair. I didn't look at him. Just in that moment, I knew we were talking about the same memory, a memory that had never been confessed but was always present in each person's heart. After that day, I had a strange dream. In the dream, I was standing under the bus stop. It was raining heavily. A boy wearing an old uniform was standing there, without an umbrella, just bowing his head. Silently, I raised the umbrella to cover him. Our eyes met. I wanted to ask his name but my throat was choked. I wanted to keep him but my legs felt frozen. Waking up, my pillow was slightly damp. I propped my hand up and looked out the window. The sun hadn't rise yet, but the sky had already turned bright. That dream wasn't new, it was just the first time I had dreamed that memory so clearly, the first time I felt the feeling of regret cutting into my heart to the point of pain. I knew I didn't just like him anymore. I want to hold your hand tightly, call your name clearly. I want to walk next to you, not only to study together, but also to go through the years together. One day before the group presentation, I came to the library earlier than usual, intending to correct my mistake. When I got there, I saw that the table was already occupied. It was a girl from the next class, who was always called the beauty queen of the economics department. She was sitting next to Tong Yuan Pham, smiling brightly. I paused for a moment. My heart felt a little uncomfortable, but then I quietly turned my head and chose a table further away. The entire day, I didn't go to him again, nor did I turn my head to look. When I was about to leave the library, I took out a book from my backpack to return it, but discovered there was a piece of paper clipped inside. It wasn't mine. It was familiar handwriting. Don't think it was random. I'll wait for you at the old place. TV. I stood still in place for a while, folded my bag, and walked toward the east window. He sat there alone. Seeing me, he tilted his head and smiled softly, without explaining anything nor asking. I sat down opposite, my hand unconsciously touching the corner of the table. I whispered, I'm not thinking of anything. He did not answer, but his eyes lit a quiet smile. We sat studying again like any other afternoon, but this time the distance between the two of us seemed to be no longer a distance. Late autumn. Thungjiang suddenly turned cold. This morning the sky was still clear. By afternoon it was covered with gray clouds. I looked out the library window, seeing the rain starting to fall drop by drop, as if someone had gently touched the glass with their fingers, tapping the rhythm of unselected memories. I forgot to bring an umbrella. Or rather, I didn't bring it. I still remembered the piece of paper from the day before. Don't bring an umbrella. If it rains, I'll cover you again. I didn't know if he still remembered that I had written that sentence, but I remembered it very clearly. By the time I finished gathering the documents and walked out of the library, the rain was pouring heavily. The students around were all busy opening their umbrellas or running back to their dormitories, leaving me standing under the eaves, my arms holding my bag, my eyes on the wet stone. paved road. I hesitated, just as I was about to take out my phone to text him. A familiar deep voice rang out from behind. Really not listening? I turned around. Tong Yuenshen stood a step away, holding a black umbrella, his body slightly leaning toward me. Rainwater fell on his shoulders. His hair was slightly ruffled by the wind. I didn't reply. He walked over and tilted the umbrella toward me. Let's go. I walked over, slightly bending to fit inside the umbrella with him. His shoulders were very close, so close that I could hear his light breathing as he said, "You're always like this, even when it's cold. You don't wear a thicker coat." I glanced at him. "Are you following me?" He chuckled. "If following is just to know what you're wearing, then I'm the most useless type of stalker." I pursed my lips, turned away, trying to hide the smile that was blooming in my heart. The whole way we walked was very slow. No one said much, only the sound of the rain falling on the umbrella and the footsteps of the two people echoing evenly on the wet brick floor. I liked this feeling, not need to talk to fill the silence, because being with him the silence was enough to become gentle. When I passed the ginkgo garden behind the west corridor, I stopped. The ginkgo tree had almost turned yellow. The leaves had fallen in a thin layer covering the ground, just like a scene in a movie I had seen. I raised my head to look at him. "I want to take a detour." He raised his eyebrows slightly, not asking why, simply tilting his umbrella. "Go." The garden was quiet. I bent down to pick up a yellow fan-shaped leaf soaked with rain, carefully pressing it into the center of the notebook page. "Are you going to keep it?" he asked. "Well, every fall I keep one. Some years I can press it. Some years I forget. But this year I won't forget it anymore." I pursed my lips and let out a soft sigh. "Because this year I have someone with me." He didn't say anything, and I didn't look at him. But at that moment, the hand holding the umbrella turned slightly toward me, so that my whole body was covered, and his shoulder got a little wetter. "Do you know?" he said softly. "There are people who go through thousands of autumns in their entire life but still don't meet anyone who makes them want to press the leaves back." I squeezed the notebook in my hand lightly. My voice was very small. "Have you ever wanted to press one?" He didn't look at me. His eyes followed the gray cloudy sky in the distance, but his hand clenched the umbrella tightly. "There was once an autumn. Years ago." My heart stopped. A cold wind passed by. I gently used himself. He turned to catch me tightening my sleeve. Without saying a word, he reached out to gently pull up my sleeve and then slipped his hand into his own jacket pocket. I widened my eyes, looking. "Don't move." I said it was cold. I didn't know what to do but stand still, my face red as if it was about to smoke. After a while, he slowly spoke. "The girl who lent me her umbrella that day also said she would keep the first ginkgo leaf of the season." I raised my head to look at him, my lips moving. "You knew it was me, right from the first time we met again. So why didn't you say anything all this time?" He laughed softly. "If I told you, would you believe me?" I was stunned. "That's right. If you had appeared in the hall that day and said we had met before, would I have believed that it wasn't just a way to start a conversation? If you had knocked on my memory's door the first time, would I have been sure that I hadn't mistakenly chosen the wrong person?" I looked at him, the boy who had once entered my memory in the rain, then quietly stepped out, now standing in front of me in another rain, with an umbrella and a gaze no longer silent. I said softly, "So, what do you want me to believe today?" He tilted his head. His eyes met mine, not avoiding, not hiding. "Believe that throughout the past year he had always remembered me, and believe that he did not come here to be a mentor." I widened my eyes. He smiled, lowly voiced, "I came to see you again. I have no doubt That you miss me, no doubt. That I have missed you for a long time. Also, no doubt that Song Yuenshin is the piece of my youth memory that I still kept, even though I never dared to open it. But the closer to him, the more I felt that there was an invisible wall between the two of us. It wasn't distance, nor was it that he was shy, but there was something he had never said. That day was Saturday. The library closed early. I was planning to go back to the dormitory when I received a message from him. If you're free, I'm on the top floor of the administrative block. The wind is nice here. I didn't reply, just picked up my coat and went straight there. The top floor of the administrative block was open. Until 6 o'clock, there was a small empty courtyard paved with grey stone surrounded by tempered glass railings. From here, I could saw the entire schoolyard, even the ring road in the distance. Song Yuenshin stood, with his back to me, his hands in his coat pockets, the wind slightly ruffling his hair. He didn't turn his head, but I knew he had heard my footsteps. This rooftop was where he often went when he was in college. I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He nodded. Yeah, back then not many people knew. It was the same now. I walked to his side, leaned against the railing. The early winter wind had already penetrated my thin coat. He glanced at me, then took off his coat and put it on my shoulders. Not asking, nor saying anything more, I lowered my head to look at my tightly clenched hands and spoke. He once said, there are things that are not worth keeping for even a second. So what about the things you've kept for a long time? Are they worth it? He didn't answer right away. After a while he slowly replied, are they worth it or not? I have to see who you are. I raised my head. The wind blew over my shoulders, but it was very warm. A moment later, I saw him leaning against the railing, his eyes looking up at the sky, his voice slowing down as if he was telling a story to himself. He used to live with his mother until he was 10 years old. I paused. He had never mentioned his family, never. His mother died of illness. And before that she was a math teacher, teaching at a middle school. She was strict but gentle. She had a habit of forcing him to bring an umbrella every time it rained, even though the sun was hot. He laughed softly as if he was recalling an old movie scene. His friends used to tease him that his mother was too controlling. But after his mother passed away, he realized that she just wanted her son not to get wet when it rained suddenly. I looked sideways at his face. His eyes had no tears, but his gaze was deep down, as if the wind had sucked all the warmth out. For a long time after that, he was afraid of the rain, not because it was cold, but because it reminded him of no one worrying about whether he had an umbrella or not. I bit my lip, not daring to breathe heavily, until I met you. His voice was lower. That day, he didn't have an umbrella. It rained very quickly. He had planned to stand there and wait for the rain to stop, and then walk home because he had gotten used to being alone for a long time. He tilted his head to look at me. The corners of his lips curved slightly, but there was a girl holding an umbrella for him, not saying anything, just standing there tilting the umbrella toward him as if it was the most natural thing. I looked at him, my throat choked up. At that moment, he truly felt he wasn't alone. So, he exhaled, his voice as soft as the wind. He had held the pen you dropped. I blinked. The pen, a silver fountain pen engraved with water waves. You didn't notice, but when you lowered your head to help me hold the document that had fallen, you dropped it. That pen. He picked it up and kept it. I didn't know if I was laughing or crying, because all this time I always thought I was the one who had always kept that memory. Unexpectedly, there was someone who had also kept me in his heart for all these years. I asked quietly why I didn't return it to her. He smiled, because at that time he thought that if there was fate, he would have the chance. And if not, that pen would be his way to remind himself that there was once a girl who made him feel warm even in the rain. We sat down on the terrace steps, together watching the city light up. I was silent for a while and then asked, "You used to say, people often keep something, not because it's special, but because there's someone who wants to keep it. Are you that person?" Tong Yuan Shen turned to look at me, his eyes shining under the dim light. He didn't answer right away, just gently reached out to brush a strand of hair tangled from my forehead to behind my ear. His voice was soft as a lullaby. "You're not the one I want to keep anymore." I was startled. He tilted his head. His eyes deepened. "You're the one I've never let go of." Final week. The exam schedule was packed. Every day I ran from the lecture hall to the library, from the library to the dormitory, and then repeated. My mind was spinning with dozens of theories and formulas. I thought I was fine until a slight dizziness set in on Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in the library, eyes glued to the computer screen, hands pressing continuously on the keyboard, until the image before my eyes suddenly blurred. I stopped, cold sweat pouring down the back of my neck. I intended to stand up, but before I could step, I felt my knees go soft, my heart beating as hard as a drum. My whole body swayed. Someone called me and then a warm hand supported my shoulder. A familiar smell came with a low voice. "Can Noet was Tong Vien Tham." I didn't know how long I had been unconscious. I only remembered when I opened my eyes. I was lying on a strange bed. The room was silent. There was a soft yellow table lamp, the sound of boiling water bubbling behind me. I blinked. My throat was dry. My whole body was exhausted as if I had just run a long distance. The blanket covered me was a thick fabric with a light tea smell very similar to the smell on his shirt. A minute later, the door opened. Tong Vien Tham came in with a bowl of porridge, saw that I was awake, and quickly walked over to put the tray on the table. My fever was nearly 39 degrees. He gently sat down on the edge of the bed. It had just subsided a bit, but my body was still hot. I nodded slightly. My throat couldn't make a sound. He poured water to my lips. The movement was very slow, but I was afraid I would break it if I used too much force. After I finished drinking, I asked weakly, "Where is this?" "The old apartment I rented when I was a teaching assistant near the school. It's not convenient to take you back to the dormitory." I bit my lip, intending to say something, but he had already brought the bowl of porridge in front of me. "Eat some porridge." I haven't eaten anything since noon. I wanted to refuse but didn't have the strength. The first spoonful of porridge he fed me wasn't too hot, nor was it bland. I looked up at him under the desk lamp. His face was calm, without any unnecessary expression, but when his eyes stopped on my forehead, there was still a very real worry. He had been here all this time? Yes. For several hours. He nodded, still feeding me porridge as if nothing had happened. I suddenly felt my nose sting. Perhaps people don't need a flowery confession, just need someone to sit next to them when they are at their weakest. Not scolding, not annoying, just staying quietly. That was enough. When I finished the bowl of porridge, he put the bowl aside and used a warm towel to wipe my mouth. That action seemed like he had known me for a long time. I asked quietly, "Have you ever taken care of someone with a fever like this?" He looked at me for a while and answered no. I laughed, but before I could tease him, he added another sentence.